Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Hayden Lee. I'm a Master Certified Coach and accredited Enneagram practitioner. And welcome to our Enneagram series. And today we're going to be talking about from vice to virtue to really work on that development path. Because with the Enneagram, which is a system of self-awareness and motivation, and it's about developing into your best self. It's about using the Enneagram as a map to develop into a better version of yourself. And one way to do that is really being aware of your type's vice, which is getting fixated on distorted ideas. And the vice kind of gets you into these default patterns of thinking and behaving that doesn't serve you. And we want to get to our virtue, which is this idea of being closer and closer to your true self and being able to be more productive and effective and have a better quality of life, when you touch upon your virtue. So today we're going to be talking about type 1, which is nicknamed the strict perfectionist. And we have an awesome type 1 today. So thank you, Jessica, for talking a little bit about vice and virtue today. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jessica Showers. I am an estate planning attorney in Colorado. And as Hayden said, I am number one, a strict perfectionist.
Yes. And as a reminder, folks, Enneagram is about motivation, not behavior. Right? So each type has a different core motivation. And for the type 1, the motivation of the perfectionist, of course, is to be good, to be perfect, to do the right thing. And the vice of the one, which sometimes gets the one in trouble or gets them stuck in unhelpful patterns, is anger. And this idea that the ones have really high standards, which we need, right? But at the same time, because ones have high standards, which are often impossible to meet, then when people do not meet those standards, anger or resentment might come up both in personal life and professional life. So can you tell us a little bit about how that vice of anger comes up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing that I find is my vice of anger comes up specifically, as Hayden mentioned, as a one, I have very high standards. I also don't do a great job of always communicating those standards, or I think I have communicated them properly or in a way that is understandable and believe that they will still work. And yet it doesn't seem to happen. And so when people miss the mark or things don't get done in the way that in my head I think that they should have happened, I go to a place of anger. And then usually that evolves into then feeling bad that I didn't do something correctly, which then builds into resentment. And then I end up in this hamster wheel of just spinning and sitting in that place of anger and resentment for a while.
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up, that it can become this vicious cycle where then there's anger at others for not meeting your expectations, but then anger towards yourself that maybe I didn't communicate correctly, or maybe that I didn't do it good enough. If I had done it good enough, then maybe they would have done it better. So this vicious cycle of anger towards others and angers towards yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
how, how do you behave when that happens, when you're in that vicious cycle of anger?
I get very quiet. My answers get much shorter, and I end up in a place where I will just do all of the work and the issues on my own,
Yeah.
because the anger of feeling like I didn't communicate properly really takes hold. And so that I think leads a bit into guilt, and that becomes very difficult for me.
Yeah, it's like this trap that you fall into, like this vicious cycle of and then what's interesting though about, and as a one, ones are very aware of kind of the right way to feel or the right way to act. So
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you're angry and knowing you feel resentful, then there's that added layer of knowing that you shouldn't feel that way. So
Yeah.
then, so tell us about how then there's this downward spiral of even shitting on yourself that you shouldn't feel this way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that land for you?
So the anger becomes something that for me is unspeakable. It's not okay to be angry. It's not I guess for me, I've not seen it in a way where it's seen as accepted. Usually, anger is an emotion that maybe as a society, or at least in our own families, is one that you don't talk about or you don't express. So I will push it down and just keep it under a I don't know how to say, but keep it suppressed so that it doesn't come out and I don't express it um, because that's not the right thing to do. And so I'll just sit in it and be in it and not express to somebody that hey, this situation or the way that these actions happened made me feel angry or made me feel upset. And the other thing I've learned is that although it manifests as anger, which is, I think, as a result of being a strict perfectionist, that may not be the emotion that is actually there. It's usually more something that for me is attached to hurt or a frustration and is not necessarily the emotion of anger, but it is manifested that way. And so, well, don't be angry, which then can, for me, lead to, well, don't be sad, don't be frustrated, don't be. Um, and sometimes any emotions, even when I'm happy, that could be one where it's like, oh, well, don't be too happy. Push that down as well. So push it down. Don't talk about it. Don't express it, and just sit in it, and then but at one point that's just not going to work anymore and for me my body reacts and at that point I break and the dam breaks and it's like and the person who ends up on the receiving end of it is usually not the person I'm actually angry with. They're the person I feel comfortable being angry with because I don't think that they will be mad at me back.
I love that distinction that you made, that the vice of the one is anger, but the emotions that you may be feeling may not be anger, but it may manifest as anger. I think that's very true. And with type 8, 9, and 1, they grapple with anger. And it's in different ways, with the 8's anger being more outward, and 8's can be explosive with, and the 9's anger is a little bit, we call it confused. It's a little bit more passive aggressive. And exactly how you describe your relationship with anger, you say you keep it in, you hold it down. That's an internal. It's like very internal, versus the 8's anger can be outward. The 9's anger is like, oh, I don't really know what to do, so I'll just be passive aggressive. And the 1 is hold it in. And I love what you said, that it might not necessarily be anger. It could be whatever it is, hurt or shame or guilt or any plethora of emotions that manifest as this seething anger. Right?
Yep. Yeah. Guilt and shame are a good one. That those, I think most of the time when I feel angry, if I take time to really unpack what happened, guilt comes up more in terms of the actual, if I had to identify the emotion. But it manifests, and the way that other people receive it is anger.
Yeah, and because I've been working with you and you're in my Enneagram group, I do know a little bit more about you. Like, and we're not talking too much about centers of expression today, but knowing that one of your centers of expression that you're working on is the feeling center, right, is not really being able to identify exactly how you feel. So the default is anger. It's not just the default, whatever the emotion is, it just like comes off as anger, even if it could be something very different. It could be sadness, it could be fear, but it could come off as anger. Well, enough of enough of talk about anger, right? Because the point of this video is like from vice to virtue, which is we want to be able to learn the Enneagram system to set ourselves free. Like I always say, the Enneagram, it's like a system of self-liberation, really. It's to be able to liberate yourself from those default patterns we fall into. For you, it might be anger and resentment and impatience. We didn't talk about maybe impatience in others, right? Because they're not, So the virtue is, I want to tell everyone, the virtue is a way to, it's a path forward. It's something we want to move toward. And the virtue is not something that you're going, it's not a destination in the sense that like, oh, I've reached my virtue and I'm cured, I'm fixed, I'm no longer, a strict perfectionist. No, that's not how it works. The virtue is kind of like a lighthouse or a guiding light that helps us break free from some of our vices. So for the type 1, it's the virtue of serenity, right? So serenity, meaning letting go, like peace, really going with the flow. And for the strict perfectionist in particular, it's really accepting the world as it is,
Mm-hmm.
accepting yourself as you are. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be, nothing's broken. Nothing. So tell me about how that idea of serenity, letting things go, and oh, nothing needs to be corrected. That's a huge
Mm-hmm.
thing for serenity. It's like, because I know that ones have that need to correct things or to make things better, to make things right.
Yeah.
So what happens for you, Jessica, when you totally let that go and accept yourself and others as is?
Um, my day gets a lot easier. Um, my interactions with my work partners gets a lot easier. And I think the biggest thing is I was surprised to learn that serenity was the virtue of the one. I remember when we first had that conversation and you were like, okay, so serenity is your virtue, serenity is your goal. And I just remember thinking, you've got to be out of your mind. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? That is not at all how ones are going to work. But when I really sat down with, I think, the definition of serenity that you gave me, which was the letting it go and go with the flow, and that didn't mean I had to get rid of my standards. But if something doesn't hit the standard, then it's coming up for me with a plan on how I'm going to address it, and then don't think about it again. Or if for example, I had something happen at work and I had to wait a few days in order to talk to the person where the standard wasn't met to the way that I thought it should have been. And I told myself, okay, you're gonna schedule that meeting and you're not gonna think about it until you meet with that person again. Because what are you gonna do for 4 days? The deadline was already blown. It was already gone. I don't have a time machine. It's totally broken. I can't get back there. All I can do is move forward
Yeah.
and have the meeting with the colleague and go, okay, help me understand what happened and what are you doing to fix it so that in the future we don't end up here, because this is not acceptable. And that went really well, actually. And in my 3 days leading up to that meeting were very enjoyable. And the meeting itself was probably more productive than any other meeting I've had because I wasn't sitting in the anger for 4 days
Yeah.
and boiling. So
Mm.
that I use the term sometimes with my colleagues, which is like, I haven't been cooking for 4 days. So I haven't been at a boiling point where then I get into the meeting with you and I just go, and explode all over the place. So I think for me, serenity is just, I don't live there all the time. Like you said, it's not like a final destination, it's a lighthouse. So, what are the plans or the steps that I can take to see the light coming from the lighthouse?
Yeah. Wow, I love what you said as well, that it's not about letting go of your high standards. It's not because that's one of the great gifts of the one, is to
Mm-hmm.
have high standards, to have high quality control, to want things to be the best that they can be. That's one of the best gifts of the one. So with ones though, how ones can also get in the trap of black or white thinking, right? It's either this or that. It's either good or
Mm-hmm.
bad. It's either right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, it's, yeah, you can have those high standards, but how can we approach it differently? Let's look at the process, not, okay, the standards weren't met. How can we look at things to support others? So that letting go, that serenity is about surrendering to the outcome, or surrendering to right or wrong, surrendering that it had to be met within this certain deadline or whatever it is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
letting go of anger and criticism too, because if you're coming from a place of anger, then it's going to come off as being very critical to the receiving party.
Right.
And then as you know, if someone feels like they're being criticized or judged, then it's not a very productive meeting,
Right.
right? So the serenity is like, all right, let's acknowledge we didn't meet the standard. Let's acknowledge we didn't hit the deadline or whatever.
Right.
How can we make this happen, or help me understand, what we can do differently? How can I can support you, rather than if it comes off as the anger place is a critical place where then people, the receiving end of the person, may shut down or then feel judged, right?
Right. And I'll say, coming at it from a serenity side, that issue never arose again with that person. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, it's the way in which you are coming into it with them, they feel that piece as well. And
Yeah.
I think the the thing for me with serenity was, again, that I don't have to give up my high standards or give up the fact that something went wrong.
Yeah.
You missed this deadline. It got blown.
Yeah.
That's just
And
how it
well,
is.
and it's
So what do we do?
and accepting it for what it is, right?
Right.
Like rather than this idea of i- the world is horrible, imperfect, and other, and but yeah, I love that. Any other? Oh yeah, any other notes or points that you want to talk about serenity?
Um, I think the just that, keep the lighthouse visual in mind if you can, with for anyone who's any way their vices or virtues are, but the more you can keep that visual, that it's a lighthouse and that you're
Yeah.
not going to live there all the time. It's not like somehow I'm now this zen creature walking around the earth.
Yeah.
But the more that you can remember that it's out there, and if you can just visualize it that way, it's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, the irony is not lost on me that there's background noise and that you, and your perfectionist, is like screaming inside. So how can we have some serenity right now for that? This video may not be perfect, the audio may not, and I'm
Oh
okay with it
goodness.
because
Are you
I'm
okay?
posting this video. So
Okay. All
how
right.
are you, Jessica? How can you
Oh
tap
my
into
goodness.
because how could you tap into serenity now with your partner or whatever having background
Yeah,
noise?
having background noise. I mean, I think the biggest thing is knowing that you're okay with it is really
Yeah.
helpful. It's just one of those moments. It's just
Yeah.
how the world operates.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we had a conversation about it, that I was like, hey, I'm going to be on a call from like 1 to 3,
Yeah.
or 1 to 1:30, and I think maybe I didn't do a great job of communicating, because there was a comment of like, well, I need to make lunch, and I just should have said, well, then make it right now
Yeah.
so that we're quiet during the phone call. But knowing that you're okay with it is certainly adding to the serenity that I'm feeling.
Well, I think what a perfect example that the world is perfectly imperfect and that we just, especially in this day and age where we're on Zoom calls, dogs are barking, phones are ringing, delivery people are at the door. I've been on calls where people's paintings are falling down behind them. And it's just like, we just gotta laugh about it, which,
Yeah.
so the serenity piece of just let it go. And
Yeah.
for the one in particular, there's the line to 7, which, this isn't about lines today, but that 7, which is, enthusiastic visionary, spontaneity, go with, you just have
Yeah.
fun, laugh about it, because it isn't laughing about it and letting it go is definitely better than the place of anger and feeling all, clenched up inside.
Right. Absolutely.
So
It
my last
makes for
question
a
for
much
you,
enjoyable day.
yeah, like you said, when you tap into serenity, it makes your day a lot more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my last question, I guess, is how can you remind yourself of what your path is from your vice of anger to your virtue of serenity? What's your reminder to
Mm.
yourself?
So the biggest thing for me, for a reminder, was also creating as terrible as it sounds, is kind of creating a schedule. So I try to add in a daily meditation each morning, even if it's just like a quick 2-3 minute thing, to just do a breathing exercise. And that has been the biggest thing, is a breathing exercise that reconnects me to my body and into the moment,
Mm,
instead of starting to spin and letting the hamster, like, I don't even let him get into the ball now. Like, you got to come back, man. I just need you to be right
yeah,
here in this moment right now. Feel what you're feeling, write it down. Sometimes I keep like a little journal next to me. Sometimes write it out real quick. And the more that I can do those things, the closer it brings me to that lighthouse of serenity.
yeah. So when you're in the moment and you feel the anger boiling up in you,
Mm.
what can be your mantra?
Um, I actually sing a line from a musical called Avenue Q, which was "It's Only for Now,"
Yeah,
and I just try to remember that it's only for now, or it's just for right now, and it and I. It's sort of like the same way you get rid of an earworm. Like when you have an earworm in your head, you're supposed to say something really short to yourself to like
yeah,
get it to stop spinning. So that line from that musical is always the thing that I think of, is like, it's only just for right now. Um, and if I can say that to myself enough times, or say that to myself quickly enough, it brings me back to this just for right now. And then I'm on to the next thing, where I'm
yeah.
not in that right now moment anymore. So that's I can hear the puppet in my head right now actually saying it. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I bring myself to where I am so that I can get onto the lighthouse.
I love that. It's only for now.
Yeah.
Lessons from Avenue Q, which I love that musical, by
Yeah.
the way. So,
Who
yeah.
doesn't love a life lesson
Yeah.
from a puppet? I mean, really.
Well, we could learn a lot from, puppets and children's stories, actually, which is,
Absolutely, we can.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. It's really cool to just learn more about your journey from vice to virtue. And yeah, and Jessica, like I mentioned, Jessica's part of one of my Enneagram groups, and it's been awesome. So, what's been your, if I can plug my Enneagram group and ask you, what's been your biggest benefit to being in our Enneagram group? Yeah.
The biggest benefit for me is having a group of people, none of which were my Enneagram type. Everybody was different. Um, and there's safety in the fact that I didn't know anybody. We get to know each other through the group, which is great, and that's really fun, and we talk, and that's really wonderful. But going into a group and not knowing anybody was really easy to be like, I'm not going to get judged in this. Nobody's going to be able to be like, oh, I remember when that happened at work last week. And yeah, you were real pain. And so that was really freeing and inviting to have that. So I just
Yeah.
love that. And I love that we have a few that are the same types, but pretty much everybody's like across the spectrum. So you get to learn about that. And I can now see it in other people in my own life. I'm like, oh, that's very two, or that was a very
Yeah.
nine move you made. So
Yeah.
that's really, I really enjoy that. It's a great part
Cool.
of the group.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you. Well, thank you, viewers, for tuning in today and hearing from Jessica and learning more about From Vice to Virtue for the Type 1. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to this. If you're watching this in other medium, go ahead and visit my website at haydenlee.com. That's HAYDENLEE.com. And check out my Enneagram group, which is, all the information is on my website, haydenlee.com. And thank you, everyone, very much. And thank you, Jessica. And yes, I wish you well in terms of remembering that lighthouse and remembering that it's only for now. So cool. Thanks so much, Jessica. And thank
Thank
you, everyone, for
you.
watching. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.